Welcome to Artificiality, the podcast by Helen and Dave from Sonder Studio. Humans are being digitized, and we're on a mission to make that better. Better decisions, better problems, better design. We make this happen with our book, Make Better Decisions, How to Improve Your Decision-Making in the Digital Age, our speaking and workshops, and our digital design work. Artificiality is one of our favorite things to do. For 3 weeks out of each month, you'll hear from us. We'll take a decision or problem in the public sphere and pick it apart. We'll talk about a decision nudge that we're using, and then we'll wrap up with something that's caught our attention and made us think. Once a month, we'll interview a great mind, someone who works at the frontier of human or machine intelligence. Welcome back to Artificiality. Hello.
Hi.
So we're here to talk about the topic of the day, it seems, everywhere you look: generative AI, ChatGPT, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, etc., etc. Bard, correct. The integration of ChatGPT into Bing, it seems to be everywhere. All of a sudden, now everywhere you look, everybody's got their hands into something that's generating content with very little prompting, with very little new human ideas. What do you think about all this?
Well, first of all, I think it's it's important. It's real. It's not a sort of passing fad.
True.
I think it is a different step to have this type of interface with the internet, if you like. And the more you play with it, the more you realize, the more you gain an intuition for its sort of various strengths and weaknesses. I don't know how you've found that in your own pursuit, which is, materially different from mine because our brains operate differently. But it gets pretty bland pretty quickly, and which is interesting because it sort of reveals to you the sort of basic state of the knowledge, if you like. And it takes a lot to get it to, it takes other steps to get it to do other things. And that is where the creativity comes in. You've got to think about the way you ask the question or what you're trying to do to prompt it in different ways. And there's even a new word for it, prompt engineering, where you you get different results with different prompts. And jailbreaking, which is the process of figuring out how to break the rules that have been set for its use by asking it different questions in different ways.
Yeah, I found it interesting. I found most success when I'm pursuing something that's sort of bland and mundane. Getting a result from ChatGPT to write a proposal for a consulting project. Blah, blah, blah. Don't worry, ours are really lively and interesting. But if you want a really bland one, it can come up with it. If you ask it to write an essay, it follows the exact same structure that we were all taught in sort of, 7th, 8th grade, and in conclusion is the beginning of the ending of each paragraph. It's very a telltale sign that actually ChatGPT wrote it. And the images tend to be ones that are either bland or highly stylized in a particular way. So we used one of the images out of Stable Diffusion that was a steampunk image on our latest ChatGPT blog post. And steampunk is one of those sort of characterized almost, sort of styles of illustration. And it seems to do a pretty good job with that. It's terrible at understanding bodies. And so you ask for things like asking for an image where someone's bending over and suddenly their feet are on backwards or their head's going out the wrong direction. It doesn't understand the structures of bodies. Now, some systems are better than others. And you start to get an understanding of where you get what kinds of answers from different places. But it is difficult to figure out, in some ways it's easy to come up with lots of great uses, but in other ways it's difficult to find ones that you actually are proud of and that you actually really want to use.
Yeah, it's I find that the best way to think about it is going back to the basic principles of all AI use. There's nothing here that's really different in terms of thinking through those sort of pros and cons, if you like. the underlying everything is still some kind of statistical processing. So there's still some kind of false positive and false negative, which accounts for, absurd answers sometimes, and nonsensical or just completely wrong. And some of those are easy to spot, but others are not. And you can't spot what you're not offered. So there's another level of your own thinking that has to be put across the top at the very basic, which we sort of call fact-checking, but it's beyond fact-checking because it's the fact in the context and it's what you're missing as well. So it's not just a straight, is this correct or not? It's always, is this correct in the context and what am I missing?
I found two wonderful errors that stand out with ChatGPT. One was that I asked it to write a biography of Bruce Springsteen. Being a kid from Jersey, I figured that would be easy for me to fact check. And it returned that one of the lines is that Bruce has written 2 best-selling books, Born to Run and Springsteen on Broadway, which was really amusing because he's written one book called Born to Run. Springsteen on Broadway is not a book. So what would be obvious to anyone who knows anything about Springsteen or anyone who's writing a biography just kind of looking through Wikipedia pages wouldn't have made that mistake. So clearly it's, that's one of those standout errors that should remind everyone that you will always have to fact check ChatGPT. There will always be errors. That's part of what being a probabilistic system is. There'll never be a way to say, I can take this and know and think 100% that it's correct because that's what a machine gave me. And obviously the best reflection of this is what happened with Google and Bard releasing their system. Someone in their marketing department decided not to fact check it before they put it in an ad. And if somebody at Google can make that mistake, probably anybody can. The other great example is I asked it to write a summary of our book. And I said, please write a summary of the book Make Better Decisions by Helen Edwards and Dave Edwards. And it started off with the book by these authors and wrote a nice long description of something that's not our book. And it took me a while to realize that ChatGPT's training apparently stopped at the end of 2021. So it doesn't even have, our book didn't exist until 2022, but it didn't say, I don't know what that book is. I haven't seen it before. I don't know anything about that book. I don't know who these authors are. It just wrote a description.
Well, it inferred.
It inferred a description of a thing that doesn't, when I was asking for a description of a thing that I know actually exists, it didn't tell me I'm giving you a description of something that's just an inference of something that might be something that could theoretically, I'm like telling you a story. It didn't even tell me that. So that was a, you can't quite tell what it knows and it doesn't know because it's not actually telling you. It's giving you a sense of the history or the lineage of the knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, one of the traps of both of these are the kind of golden rule of AI design, which is really how do you design for failure? And failure is glossed over, and failure becomes this almost squishy zone between the human mind and the machine mind. And humans are pretty happy to ignore it. And the machines have no ability not to ignore it. So it's fine to say, well, the responsibility's back on the user, and that's a lot of how the universities are handling it. You're responsible for the errors, but it's a different kind of error than picking up the wrong book or interpreting a text incorrectly. It's a different kind of error when a machine makes it. And part of it's because you're so much more subject to, well, we don't really even know quite how automation bias works here. It's that desire that we all have for a one right answer can easily bleed into a desire for not just the one right answer, but the one right action. And I think that's where it sort of gets a little bit it's much more problematic in companies for people to be thinking, well, I'll just turn this on and it'll tell me everything I need to know. It's sort of the next layer of data-driven decision making, where the promise is one right answer, optimizable, not able to be found by humans, only able to be found by machines. It's another step in this AI journey that we've been living for a long time. It's a pretty big step. But the way to pass it is to be able to go back to those core principles of AI. How does it fail, and how does the human know, and how do they take responsibility for that? How do they correct for that failure after they've detected it? What happens if they don't detect it? And what do you do about what is essentially some kind of automation bias? The one where this, I think, is a little different, sort of on a next level, is attribution and ownership. And again, the university's handling this, and school districts handling it somewhere between a total ban, which is frankly just unrealistic, or you have to cite your sources. And that's the problem, right? You can cite all day long that you use ChatGPT for something, but that doesn't tell you what ChatGPT cited, other than this sort of fuzzy corpus of the entire internet that we know based on our sort of third law of AI, which is the bias aspects and what's represented and what's not represented in the data. And we just have so much less explainability. We really need ChatGPT to have a metacognitive function where it explains exactly how it got there. And sometimes that's how this jailbreaking works, is getting it to explain the rules around its misuse and as a workaround. But I think it's going to be interesting to track how the next few weeks, where the sort of once the hype and the excitement has settled down into, okay, so this is what it really means.
Yeah, I think your point about this, the next level of data-driven decision-making, hits me right sort of where I'm thinking right now. If I could put up a big billboard to get the attention of every C-suite, it would be, this is a bigger deal than thinking about how your employees are going to be using data, which we know a lot of companies basically kind of ignored. They thought building a data lake or a data warehouse or a data lake house or whatever they've got with all this information, that suddenly people would be able to figure it out. They'd make some dashboards, and they sort of assumed that people would know how to do stuff with all this data. And we found that actually isn't true. It actually requires quite a lot of change management, because digital transformation is actually about the people. You can digitize everything, but if the people don't know how to use it, they don't understand how they want to use it, what's going to be most effective, you'll never get the ROI, right? So we've seen all this data that comes out about how few digital transformation projects are actually successful. I think the number one reason is that people forget to think about the people. And this is going to be even harder, because everything in it is AI generated, which we know has a whole bunch of new layers of challenge and conflict and consideration required. And without having a very focused change management program, you're going to have this thing kind of go wild in ways that you don't really understand. So I think of it almost like generative AI is now a new research department, right? So imagine you just hired dozens or hundreds of people to be generating all kinds of new information and pushing it all throughout the organization. You'd be thinking about, how do we integrate these people into our processes? How do we integrate this information? How are we going to use this in our marketing campaigns, our internal strategy projects, or however else, our customer communications? You'd be working through that as a program. What I worry about is people are so enamored by how cool it is, and they're just kind of excited for people to use it, especially because at the moment it's basically free, that they're not going to think about it until it's a little too late. And then you have the gaffes, like what's happened at Google. Then you have the issues of IP theft, which are slowly working through the legal system. Who really owns this stuff? Can you actually use these things? Where are there the lines there that you want to be really careful about? What kind of processes do you need for your people to use these things? And I'm worried that we're going to have yet another generation of new technology being shoved into the enterprise, where people are excited because of all the new whizzy tech, and then they're going to fall flat on their face because they haven't thought about it well enough.
Well, yeah, we don't even know some of the holes we're going to fall into, which is actually one of the exciting things about this, because it is that we've been talking for years about this emergence that happens with machines and humans interacting, and it's happened everywhere. It's just that it isn't really all that obvious. It hasn't really been all that obvious until these tools, because it's the way we communicate visually or in language. It's not like most people haven't really realized the full significance of what DeepMind did with protein folding, because they're not in that field. But we all speak and we all communicate with images. And so we can see how profound this is. We can feel it when we sit down and use these tools, that they're fun, that they do allow you to create things that that used to be really hard work or beyond your capabilities, and now they're just easy, literally sort of press of a button, which makes it exciting and makes it fun. But we don't even know yet the holes that people will fall into by believing the first thing they read or acting on something. And the one you mentioned about IP theft, the fact that it's trained on someone's creative work and then you use it puts this abstract layer between you and the sense that you're stealing. And that is extremely problematic, and must be very concerning, very frightening for people in the creative pursuit, because we've learned over the years that you can't just appeal to old school values. You can't just say, well, it's the humans who will do the human thing and will value that human touch. There's nothing here that says that an artist is going to be valued because they've put a human touch of paint on something. There's absolutely nothing that says that. In fact, all of the history of the last 5 years would suggest completely the opposite. And it becomes a sort of creative free-for-all where the reward is that your particular creative thing, like a little video on TikTok or something, you get lucky and that goes viral. And that goes viral because it's extreme and there's something about it that sort of hits a note, and it's luck. But now those things are done on the back of somebody else's creative work that they probably have a student loan for how much they for their training in that creativity. So I think it's and you can't. I mean, you look at it adds a definite layer, I think, to responsible AI. If you're in a company, that is it responsible to type in a prompt that allows you to create an image in the style of, without that attribution, without that without money without them being paid, and that the horse is so bolted on this. I don't know how we ever sort of claw back, but it's a big step change in what is essentially creative theft.
Sure. And, we experience this. We have a book that, an AI can digest once it gets trained on last year's books, and all of that information will somehow be put together. And everything we've ever published, whether it was on our own blogs or when we were writing at courts, everything that we've done can now be ingested and reused. And even though all of those things are copyrighted, we have the copyright from the U.S. Copyright Office for our book, that's not supposed to be repurposed beyond a certain, there's laws about how you can use copyrighted work, but the big tech world seems to just be able to skirt around it by basically saying, oh, well, yes, we're ingesting all of it, but the way we use it is different.
We're special.
We're special, yeah. But it does mean that the rest of us who've actually labored to create these things, that it can definitely make you feel a lot less special, or like more like your career is a bit in jeopardy, because it just seems to be that once you put something out, everybody gets to reuse it. And there's something there that's clearly wrong.
Well,
I
it
don't
goes
know how
back
you
to the
write
sort
it,
of
though.
that departure that happened at the very start of the internet. The information wants to be free. That didn't mean free as in
Not
zero
paid.
zero price. It meant free in terms of everyone being able to use it, and attributing something that's gone through some form of neural network, which is now 10x more complicated than it was even 10 years ago, 100x, 1,000x, billions of parameters and different ways of processing. There's no way that you can have a line, realistically have some sort of line back. So we've got very blunt instruments for dealing with what is an extremely complicated situation.
Yes. All right, you want to talk about a nudge that you're using this week?
Well, the nudge I'm using this week flows distinctly off the back of all of this, which is synthesize later. And synthesize later is, I think, one of those nudges that you can take at sort of face value, as in I'm just going to, bring, once I've defined my problem, done my analysis, I'm going to pull the analysis together and synthesize sort of an overarching conclusion. But we're talking here about a sort of you can take it right up to sort of high level synthesis, where we're talking about this is what AI still doesn't do very well, is synthesize. It's what you're looking at when you look at ChatGPT is a summary in natural language from the corpus of the internet, with a bit of kind of putting together a few themes. And it's usually pretty sensical. But it's not the same as the synthesis that humans do when they come to the end of a problem or the point of a decision, where you're not just summarizing. You're not just saying, well, I've kind of got to the end of what I can understand here. You're actually pulling together what other people think, the different perspectives, as well as what the data says, as well as the synthesis of what you think the future is going to be like, which is what AI can't really tell you by definition. And this, I think, this idea of synthesis as a human strength, as something that won't be replaced by machines. I think focusing in, I've felt much better about where the AI is going when I look at and what humans can do when I think hard about getting better at synthesis and not just sort of skipping over that step. It's something we need to learn to value.
I like that one. So my nudge at the moment is explain, teach, pitch. So this nudge is inspired by Tanya Lombroso. And it's about how you generate more of your ideas through explaining, right? It's a generative act. And there's 3 different levels. You're explaining something to someone that helps you understand what you're actually thinking. You teach them, which means that you have to understand where they are. So you have to understand what they know and bridge that gap. And then pitch, you're actually trying to motivate them to do something about it. And I've been using this because we've been in the midst of doing a lot of content creation for various presentations and consulting projects. We've looked at how do you undertake change to prevent runaway expenses or low ROI in digital transformation projects. We've looked at teaching people about the basics of human-centered design and how you think about that inside of an organization. We've been working on complexity and complex problem solving and how do you tackle those kinds of problems. And we're working on generative AI and how do you think about that inside the enterprise. And all of those, there's a level explaining and there's a level of teaching that comes into that, which at times can be hard, but you don't really know enough about your audience to know what they know and they don't know. But that nudge is really important. And at times we get to that pitch where we're actually making a pitch. This is what we think, you should be considering to do. So you sort of step through all 3 of those layers. So that's been a really helpful nudge right now.
That has certainly been your week.
It has been my week. Excellent. Well, any sources, new readings, ideas that you'd like to share with the audience, things that that been inspiring your mind to go, whir?
Well, I just finished a book by Hannah Critchlow, who's a neuroscientist from the UK, called Joined Up Thinking. And it's a great summary of where the sort of state of the science is around how we can build our intelligence collectively as humans. It goes really everywhere from some of the cultural things that we spend a lot of time talking about in our data-driven decision-making course. In fact, every sort of page I turned, I went, oh, there's another one of the things that we use, including Joel Pearson and his work on intuition out of Sydney, and John Coates, who did the work on interoception and how traders on Wall Street make their calls, right through to some of the more advanced artificial intelligence systems, or the neural link kind of neural lace, brain to brain type, body to brain, brain to brain, brain to computer type connections. But I found it a fascinating read, and it's so many books that cross the psychology technology boundaries are very weighted towards the way that men have thought about this world and have studied status and intelligence from and teamwork from a sort of very male perspective. And she really isn't like that. It's quite refreshing to have it so much more of a female bias in the way of thinking about how teams work. So I found it a delightful read, actually, and would highly recommend it.
Excellent. Well, I just started a book, the newest book by Don Norman, which is not out yet, and I'm very excited. I won't go into it too much because I will sneak preview. We will be interviewing Don Norman very soon, and about his new book, and so make sure to subscribe and make sure that you get an alert when that interview comes out in the next few weeks. But I'm very excited about this. I think I've read most, if not all, of his books in the past, and his mindset and perspective continues to broaden ever from the beginning of designing everyday things. It was very much around, individual ideas and products and affordances, that whole structure that we now use so much, to much more human-centered design, and now larger and larger. And so he's thinking about much, much bigger topics than in the past. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me on Artificiality. And thank you for listening in. And we look forward to sharing our next exciting interview with you. That'll be next week. So stay tuned for an interview with David Krakauer from the Santa Fe Institute. And we'll be chatting with you again soon. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy our podcast, please subscribe on Substack or your favorite podcast platform. And please leave a positive rating or comment. Sharing your positive feedback helps us reach more people and connect them with the world's great minds. Seriously, a review on Apple Podcasts is a big deal. And if you like how we think, then contact us about our speaking and workshops and human-centered product design. You can learn more about us at getsonder.com, and you can contact us at hello@getsonder.com. You can learn more about making better decisions in our book, Make Better Decisions: How to Improve Your Decision-Making in the Digital Age. The book is an essential guide to practicing the cognitive skills needed for making better decisions in the age of data, algorithms, and AI. Please check it out at mbd.zone, on Amazon, bookshop.org, or place an order through your favorite local bookstore.
Solid state.